But now we're on top of Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Yevamos Daf Kuf Yud Amid Beis, and the Mishnah has an entire list of scenarios. And the common denominator in all these scenarios is that there's no nefila for yibum, at least not on a deraisa level. For example, Shnei Achim Chershin Nisuim L'Shtei Achios Pikchos. So that no matter what, even if the two sisters are Pikchos, but nevertheless, the marriage in both cases is the Rabbanan, because the Baal, the Makadesh, was a Cheresh. And his Kedusha was through Remiza, which means it's the Rabbanan. The Zikas Yibum now is going to be the Rabbanan. But again, the Yevama here is Achos Ishto, right? Because two brothers marry two sisters. And that's an Erva Doraisa, an Erva D'Rabbanan, because there's no Ishus Doraisa here. And we have a Ptur of Arayos, right? The Mishnah at the beginning of Yevamos, one of them is Achos Ishto. So here we have Achos Ishto D'Rabbanan. And that's going to be Mafkia, the Zikas Yibum D'Rabbanan. And therefore the Mishnah is going to pass in Arelu Pturis Min Achalitza Min Hayibum. Oh, next case. Shtei achios achas pikachas v'achas chereshes. If they're two sisters, even though one is a pikachas, it's irrelevant because the two makadshim, the two brothers, were a chershim. So once again, we have ishus d'Rabbanan. V'chei, now the opposite. Flip it around. Shtei achios chershos nesus shnei achim pikchim. But since the Torah requires das for Kedusha, not only with regard to the Mekadesh, but also with regard to the Miskadeshes. So here we have two cases of a marriage d'Rabbanan. And when there's a Zika d'Rabbanan, we're going to apply the principle of an Erev of Achos Ishto to be Mafkia the Zikas Yibum. Oh, L'Shnei Achim Chershim. Well, let's say the two Achim are Chershim, marrying to two sisters Chershos. I mean, this is really not a Chiddush. He points out here that Hirchiv Hatana Bavos Mikrim Elu B'Chtei Lichos Kol Ofani. Fine. So the Tana covers all the possible scenarios, even though there's no Chiddush at all in this last case of two Achim, let's say Chershim, who are married to two Achios Chershos. What's common in all these cases is that there's no Zikas Yibum Turis Min Achalitza Min Hayibum. Why? Because of Achos Ishto. And Achos Ishto is an Erva. And there's no Nefila for Yibum and Zikas Yibum in the case of an Erva. An Erva patters up Yibum. And again, it's irrelevant if the Erva is the Rabbanan, because the entire Rishus L'Chatchila that generated the Zika was also the Rabbanan. Now the Mishnah continues. Let's say these two brothers married two women that are not related to each other. They're not sisters. One of these two brothers died without children, and his wife fell for Yibum to his brother. Is Yichnesu. Then on the D'Rabbanan level, there'll be a Zikas Yibum, and it'll be Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum D'Rabbanan. If after the Yibum he wants to divorce his wife, his former Yamama that he married, then even though he's a Cheresh, his get could be Mafkia, this Ishus, because of the halach of Kedushay Remizo, meaning that the Kedusha itself, on the part of the Cheresh who died, was only Kedushay Remizo, Kedushay D'Rabbanan. And therefore, with a case of the Cheresh who's miyabim eishes ochav Cheresh, then he could be Magarisha. And there's no Gzeir D'Rabbanan, as we said before, to prohibit Gerishin so that the spectator won't make a mistake and think that even if the Eishes Achiv was a Zika Doraisa, because the late brother was a Pikeach, then he's allowed, this Cheresh is allowed and is capable of being Megarish's wife. So we see that this whole Gzera is not accepted. Ella, therefore, the Gemara says, we're going to have to throw out this answer of Gzera. We got to go back to the original answer, the first teretz that we gave, that the din of Cheresh Meikaro, that he's not Megarish through Ksiva, is referring to a Yavama that fell in front of the Cheresh from the Ach Pikeach, which means that the original marriage to the late brother was Doraisa, the Yibum and the Zikas Yibum was Doraisa, and therefore the Cheresh, now the Yavam, cannot be Megarish through Ksiva, because we're talking about Ishus Deoraisa. Now, the Tanakama says, let's go back to the Gemara in Amud Aleph, that there's no validity to a get that was commissioned by a Cheresh, when the Cheresh wrote Kisvu utnu get zela ishti. And then Rab Shimon Gamliel says, no, that's only because it's a Cheresh Meikara, and we're dealing with Ishus Doraisa, and therefore Ksiva will not help to generate a kosher again. But if he was a Pikeach v'nischarish, and originally he was a Pikeach, and he had das, then Rab Shimon Gamliel, is machshir the get when the Pikeach v'nischarish writes on a piece of paper, Kisvu tnu get liishti. Rabbi Yochanan chalukim olav chaver val Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. You should know that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is not coming to interpret the Tanakama, but rather to disagree with the Tanakama. And the Tanakama, will call them the Chachamim, they actually hold that even a Pikeach v'nischaresh is not able to be Megarish's wife, despite the fact that he's Yodel Edaber Mitoch HaKsav. So whereas, and again, I'm just formulating Rabbi Yochanan. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that Yochel Adar Mitoch HaKsav will always apply in a case of a Pikeach Meikaro, because he once had the status of a Bardas. There was a temporary blockage, which he removes through Ksiva. The Tanakama disagrees with him and holds that if the Kiddushin and the Ishus was Doraisa in the case of Pikeach Meikara, once he becomes a Cheresh, he is a La Bardas. He cannot divorce his wife. And Ksiva Mitoch and Dibur Mitoch HaKsav will not change his status as a Shota and give him and grant him the status of a Bardas. So it seemed to me that according to Rabbi Yochanan, we're really dealing here with a fundamental controversy between the Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel about the efficacy of Dibur Mitoch HaKsav. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that Dibur Mitoch HaKsav on a Doraisa level is Dibur, and it removes his status as a Cheresh / Shota and regenerates his original status as a Pikeach. Resurrects his original status. Chacham hold Yochel Dam Mitoch HaKsav is not Dibur. It's very nice, if you want to clarify if he has Das, and for Ishus D'Rabbanan and Remiza and so forth and so on. But it can't change his status as a Cheresh. Once he's a Cheresh, he's a Cheresh. Unless he has Dibur. Now the Gemara is going to really jump on Abai. But Abai claims that from Yevamos Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amid Beis, I'm going to prove Rabbi Yochanan that the Tanakama and the Chachamim disagreed with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Because it says there in Yevamos that if a pikachas was married to a pikeach, and then nishtes, she became a shota, lo yotzi, he cannot be megarisha. Now this halacha at face value is a bella, because gerushin does not require dasa isha. Isha misgareshes balkarcha. So who cares if she was nishtates? But there are two ways of going here. Either the Gemara means that it's mishalcha v'yena mishalcha v'chozeres, or what the Gemara means is that midrabanan they were afraid, as we'll soon see later, that maybe there'll be noeg ba minag hefker if she gets the get. Oh, but what's the main point of Abaye? It says that nischaresh hu o nishtata, not that she became a shota, but he became a shota or a cheresh, whose din is like a shota. Lo yotzi olamis. There's no possibility of this cheresh divorcing his wife. Now wait a second. According to Reb Shimon Gamliel, who cares if he became a cheresh? He was once a pikeach, and through dibur mitoch haksav, he can resurrect his original status as pikeach. So what does it mean, lo yotzi olamis? Lav diafagav diyochel adav mitoch haksav. So you see clearly that this Mishnah in Yevamos reflects the shita of those who reject the dissenters against Reb Shimon Gamliel. And that's where Rabbi Yochanan was saying that the Chacham did not accept Reb Shimon Gamliel. Amar Papa ilav d'sham'in and Rabbi Yochanan. If we put Rabbi Yochanan on the side for a moment, and we would assume fakert that Reb Shimon Gamliel is interpreting the Tanakama, and everybody agrees to Reb Shimon Gamliel that if he was a pikech meikara, and he became a cheresh, and now he could write and communicate mitoch haksav that he has the status of a pikeach. Havamina Reb Shimon Gamliel, I would have said the following if not for Reb Yochanan. Lefrushe time tanakamu diyasa. Okay, fine, but it says eino megarsha olamis, lo yotzi olamis. My olamis afal gav dechazina leidecharif. It means the following. At this point, Rav Papa is making a fundamental distinction, which we didn't see anywhere in the sugya, between two possible ways of establishing that a cheresh is really a pikeach. One way, and allowing him to divorce his wife. One way is called dibur mitoch haksav. And the other way is called remiza. Remiza means we ask him, do you want to divorce your wife? And he shakes his head. When it says in the Mishnah in Yevamos, lo yotzi olamis, it's referring to lo yotzi olamis al yidei remiza. Remiza does not have the power to regenerate his original status as a pikeach. What we need is Yachal Adavar Mitoch Haksav. But Einochinami, if it was Yachal Adavar Mitoch Haksav, then leaving Rabbi Yochanan on the side, Kuliyama Lo Pligi, that he is a pikeach and he can divorce his wife. He just has to write down instructions on a piece of paper for the aid. Inami, the Gemara now offers another way of rejecting Abai's proof. When it says Lo Yotzi Olamis in the Sefer, doesn't say it in the Reisha, is Li Kid Rabbi Yitzchak, to teach us the Chiddush of Rabbi Yitzchak. Diam Rabbi Yitzchak, Dvar Torah, Shota Vizgareshes. In other words, Lo Yotzi Olamis in the Sefer is only coming to teach us something about the Reisha. And that is what? That although the Torah allows you to divorce a shota because there's no requirement of dasa ish and gerushin, but nevertheless, once she's a shota, we will not recognize the validity of the get. Why not? Oh, this is on a deraisa level. And why does it say in the ratio of this Mishnah in Yevamos that there's no gerushin? So the Mishnah in the ratio says lo yotzi olamos to teach us that only midrabanan he cannot be megarisha. As far as the Sefer is concerned, the Sefer would maintain that even on a doraisa level, he cannot be megarisha. Why? Because the ish requires das, and now he's a cheresh. So the Mishnah in the Reisha says lo yotzi olamis in regard to nishtates, because that's a derabanan halacha that he cannot be megarisha because shema yinagu ba minag hefk. In the Sefer, even on a deraisa level, he cannot be megarisha. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Vayin Aleph Amid Beis. Amrullah, they said to a bari or a shchimera who is lucid, and he has no children, and nichtov get li ishtecha, if you'll die, then your wife will fall for yibum because you don't have any children. V'yomer lehem ksovu. Now, when he says to them, write a get, he is indicating that he's makpid and he wants them to write the get, but not someone else. But Amru, what do? L'sofer, they decided to commission a sofer v'kasa. And v'edim l'edim v'chasmu. So again, if he would have told these edim, go appoint someone to write and sign my get, then we get into the whole sugya of mili. But in this case, he said to them, ksuvu. He wants them to write the get. Afal pisha kasvu v'chasmua v'nasnua lo. V'chazv v'nasnul harei ze get batel ad sheyomer l'sofer ksov l'edim chasum. So since he told them to write the get, and they went ahead and commissioned the sofer to write the get instead of writing it themselves, then the get is batel. And even if the Baal would get the get back and give it to her himself personally, it's the get is batel. It was not written lishma. The lishma of the get would only be possible if the Eidim themselves wrote the get. But if, on the other hand, the Baal himself said to the sofer, you write the get, then everything's fine. If he himself tells the Eidim, you sign the get, then it's fine. And here we have a major, major issue in the Achron. We have machlokas with the Eidim Masiri Karse, Eidi Chasima Karse. According to Rabbi Meir, Eidi Chasima Karse means afilu motza get biashpa v'chasmo. As long as there was chasima lishma, the get doesn't have to be written lishma. So what's this whole discussion here about ksiva? And where the ksiva was lishma, because the Baal didn't authorize this sofer. Who cares? It's not worse than what's a get biashpa. And if we're going to Rabbi Loza that Eidei Masira Karsi, so what does that mean? That the get has to be written lishma, but there's no din of chasim at all according to Rabbi Loza. So what's this whole business about? They didn't sign the get; they gave it to other people to sign the get. So the answer that's offered is based on the Rif and the Rambam, who hold that according to Rabbi Loza, af eidei masira karsa, and that means that Rabbi Loza himself would agree to Rabbi Meir that you can rely on Eidi Chasima. And if you have Eidi Chasima, you don't need Eidi Masira. The raya from the get itself through the Chasima is sufficient. So our Mishnah is talking about a case where there were no Eidei Masira, and therefore we need Eidei Chasima. And we're going according to Rabbi Lozo, who requires Ksiva Lishma, so we need both Ksiva and Chasima. The Gemara says, let's be medayik from the Mishnah Taima. The reason why the get is batel is Mishum Delo Amar Tnu. He didn't say that they should give the get to his wife. He says Kisvu. And since he said Kisvu, it implies that he's makbid that they should write the get. They shouldn't allow anyone else, another sofer, to write the get. He's embarrassed that he doesn't know how to write the get. Ha'amar Tnu, no signification of the Mishnah is that if he said to them, Tnu get li ishti, and he didn't say Kisvu, then he makes them into a bezdin, again, if there are three people, and they can tell someone and authorize someone to write the get, because the rishus is in the hands of bezdin to do so, and the get would be kosher. Frekti Gemara Mani, who is the author of the Mishnah? Because the only way we could allow a bezdin to appoint a sofer is if you hold mili memser l'shlichus. And the Gemara says, Eino chinam. Our Mishnah reflects a shita Rabbi Meir, he diyomer mili memser l'shlichus. So a person could appoint a shliach to replace him as his agent, and that's shlucho shel adam kemosa. So therefore, he can appoint the bezdin as his shlichim to appoint a sofer. So if the Baal says tnu, what he means to say is that you become a bezdin, and you're in charge of supervising and guaranteeing the nesinas get. And you as bezdin can tell a sofer to write the get. That's in the case where he says tnu, he appoints them as a bezdin. And if there are three people, the rishus is beyond bezdin to appoint a sofer. But if he says kisvu, and he's makpid that they and only they should write the get, no one else should, even if he says this in front of a bezdin, Rabbi Meir holds that the bezdin could not appoint someone else to write the ksiva because the Baal was makpid that they and only they should write the ksiva. So Gemara says a seifa. But let's read the seifa. Achi yomer l'sofer ksov v'le'edim chasomu. Umashmashim lo omar kein abal l'sofer furush. El omar lacherim tnu v'heim omar l'sofer shichtu is ksivasa psula. So if they appoint others to write the get is possible. If he didn't say explicitly to the sofer, you write the get. Why not? Why can't they commission someone, if we're holding like Rabbi Meir, unless you can say there aren't three people there? Okay, that we'll see later on. But right now the Gemara is holding there are three people. They become a bezdin, according to Rabbi Meir, they could appoint a sofer. And the Gemara answers the only way we can understand that the bezdin cannot appoint a sofer is asan l'Rabbi Yossi d'Omer Mili lo mimsul shliach. And Mili cannot be subject to shlichus, and therefore the ksivas sofer is not going to be meaningful unless the sofer is appointed by the Megarish himself. Is Reisha Rabbi Meir v'Sefer Rabbi Meir in Reisha Rabbi Meir v'Sefer Rabbi Yossi? Comes along Abaye, and he's going to offer an alternative answer. Abaye Amakula Rabbi Meir. The entire Mishnah reflects and is attributed to Rabbi Meir. And why in the Seifa is the Ksiva disqualified unless the Baal told the Sofer to write it? To lo Amar Tnu. He didn't just say Tnu, but rather he said Kisvu Utnu. So since the Baal was medagdik and he was very careful and meticulous to be metzaven not only on the nesinas I get, but also on the ksiva, and he didn't command this sofer himself to write it, the get is not kosher. But if he would say, if the Magash would have said Tnu, then they could actually appoint a sofer, because this Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, who holds Mili Mimsere Lishlichus. So the Gemara asks, Hachi, if the Tanava Mishnah concedes that if he says to the Baal, if the Baal says Tnu, and he only says Tnu, then Enoch Hinami, reflecting the Shita Rabbi Meir, they become a Bezdin, and they can appoint a Sofer, is then, why does it say in the Sefer of this Mishnah, it says the Ksiva is not valid until the Baal himself talks to the Sofer and commissions him to write the get, Ad Sheyomer Tnu Miboilin. As long as he dropped the word Kisvu and he only said Tnu, then we're going according to Rabbi Meir, then the word Tnu implies that he appointed them as a Bezdin, and then they could commission a Sofer to write the get. So why do you have to talk about, a case where he only said Tnu? I'm sorry, a case where just one second, I'm sorry. Where the Baal himself commissioned the Sofer, forget about that. If he says Tnu, that itself is enough. The Gemara answers in the Sefer, where it says that the Ksiva is possible until the Baal himself commands the Sofer to write it. But if he says Tnu, then it's not meaningful. So there weren't three men over there, and therefore there was no Bezdin. He only spoke in front of two people. And Moda Rab Meir, Rab Meir concedes that even if he says Tnu, and even though Mili Nimser Lashlichus, he didn't make them into a Bezdin. And therefore they don't have the authority and the license to authorize anyone else other than themselves for the Ksiva. So therefore, it doesn't say in the Sefer that if he would say Tnu, then it's okay for them to authorize a Sofer, because there's no Bezdin, there's no three people. So the Gemara asks, Hachi, if so, in the Sefer, why does it say? It should have said Achiyom Shlosha Mipoile. The Tana should have written Achiyom Shlosha, and then in such a case, then they could authorize a Sofer to write the get. And why does the Mishnah again in the Sefer says that the Ksivas HaSofer is not valid until the Baal directly, face to face, mandates him the Sofer to write the get? Ella says the Gemara, let's go in another approach to the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi, we're holding now the Mili Lomim Suri L'Shufas, and therefore the writing of the Sofer would not be valid unless the Baal himself personally commissions the Sofer face to face. And in the Reish of our Mishnah, the reason is not that they can't tell a Sofer to write it because the Baal said Kisvu and he didn't say Tnu, as the Gemara originally was Medayik, but rather Hochamai Askinen Delo Omar Imru. The Baal did not explicitly say Imru, because although Rabbi Yossi holds Milo Memsere L'Shlichus, and the Shliach cannot appoint someone else for the Ksiva, but if he would have said the Baal, Mefurash, explicitly, Imru Leploni V'yichtavu, then even Rabbi Yossi would agree that in that case, we say that Omer Imru is kosher. And Rabbi Yossi concedes. And now it's clear that the Chison in the Reish of our Mishnah, which generates the psul of the get, is because he said ksuvu, but he didn't say imru leploni v'yichtu. Frekti Gemari Hachi, why does it say in the Sefer that in order to be machshir the get, we need that the Baal should directly appoint the Sofer as his Sofer? It should have said Achiyomer imru miboilin. All we need is that he tell so-and-so that he should write the get. And furthermore, mi moder Rav Yossi b'mimru. Your premise that Rav Yossi, although mili lo mimsul shuchus, but if he's omer imru, it's kosher, is not correct. Vatnan. We have a Mishnah later on in Daf Pei Zayin. We've already seen this in the past. That even if there are two Eidim who want to sign the get, I'm sorry, even if there are no two Eidim to sign the get, the Ksav Sofer v'Eid Kosher, you have one Eid to sign the get, and you have the writing of the Sofer. And the writing of the Sofer is a unique writing which makes it like a chasima, and the get is kosher. The Omer Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Chasam Sofer Shaninu. It's not enough to rely on the Ksivas HaSofer to be mitzarefim as an aid, as a second aid, but rather we need that the Sofer sign on the get. And it's the signature of the Sofer that links him up to the Eidos. So it means we now have two Eidim signed on the get. V'yomer of Chizda Masnisa and Mani. Who is that Mishnah later on in Daf Pei Zayin? That Chasimas HaSofer Kshera. This is a very big problem that the Sofer should sign the get. Mani, here on Daf Ayin Beis, Rabbi Yossi. This halacha that the Sofer himself could sign the get reflects the unique shita of Rabbi Yossi, the Amar Mili Lo Mimsul L'Shlichus. And as a result of Mili Lo Mimsul L'Shlichus, we don't have to be choshesh for a kalkala. So Mirza Hashem, B'li Neder, we'll try to do this tomorrow night. We'll try to understand how Rav Papa works out the Mishnah. I'm sorry, Rav Chizda works out the Mishnah according to Rav Yossi. So let me wish you a meaningful fast.
Begam Lamar.
Okay, thank you so much. I should have been able to read your lips after all we learned about a cheresh.